Huh? Mm. r/NoSleep by user Worcester_ST. I've been flying for almost 30 hours, and the flight attendants won't stop crying. 30 hours ago, I hopped on a late night flight from New York heading to Los Angeles. After boarding, I saw that I had an entire row to myself. Takeoff passed without incident, and soon I was stretched out for a nap across the row. I slept for a few hours. I don't know how long, but I woke up some severe turbulence. It's possible that the lights in the cabin went out for a moment, but I was so disoriented that it's hard to say. I checked my phone to see that it was 4:03 a.m., which I figured gave me about an hour until we landed. When I looked out the window, I was shocked to see nothing but wide open ocean. My jaw dropped. There's obviously no ocean between New York and Los Angeles. I hit the button to call the flight attendant and spent the next few minutes racking my brain for a lake that could have possibly been big enough to explain what I was seeing. I jumped when the attendant flipped off the light. She was grinning from ear to ear, and tears were pouring down her cheeks. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked. I froze for a moment at her reaction before deciding just to ask my question. "Where are we? Why did it look like we're flying over an ocean?" She wiped her cheeks to clear the tears, still grinning widely. "Sir, we'll be landing in about an hour." Okay, thank you," I said. After she left, I checked the clock on the phone again. 4:03 a.m. blinked back at me. It hadn't changed. I had to have been waiting for my call light for at least 5 minutes. How was it possible that I hadn't changed at all? I opened my laptop and saw it too displayed 4:03 a.m. I pulled out my phone, started a stopwatch in the app, and spent the next 2 hours looking back and forth between the clocks, waiting for them to change. They never did. I tapped the shoulder of an old woman sitting in a row ahead of me. She looked back, an annoyed expression across her face. "Yes?" she asked. "Do you know how long it is until we land?" I asked. She narrowed her eyes. "The flight attendant said it'll be about another hour." I shook my head in confusion. "That flight attendant? We talked about almost 2 hours ago. We should have already landed." She stared at me as if I was crazy. I was going to continue to try to convince her, but I felt a hand on my shoulder. I spun to see a male flight attendant grinning from ear to ear, tears pouring down his cheeks onto my shoulder. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to calm down, or I'll be calling the captain." I told him that wouldn't be necessary and sat back. He removed his hand and stepped away. The flight attendants continued to stop by every few hours, offering meals. My stopwatch continued to tick up and now telling me that they've been on this plane for more than 30 hours. I've explored all of coach and tried talking to others, passengers, but they've all told me they're expecting to land in about an hour or so. Around 3 hours ago, I tried getting to first class. I made it past the curtain, but was escorted back by 2 grinning flight attendants. Their grin on my arm was like a lion. "Sir, the seatbelt sign is on," one said. "Please remain in your seat with your buckle fastened. We'll be landing in about an hour." I'd just about given up hope when a woman came down the aisle, dressed in a business suit. She didn't look at me or slow down, but she dropped a piece of paper in my tray as she made her way to the bathroom at the back of the plane. I shoot a look around before unrolling it. It said, "Are you stuck too?" I pulled out a pen and wrote, "Yes, it's been 30 hours." I folded the scrap paper up and set it on the tray close to the aisle. She left the bathroom and picked it up and passed. It's been 20 minutes since then. I don't know why, but I don't think the flight attendants would like if they knew that we were talking. It doesn't matter. I have to do something. I'll update you all whatever happens next. A few hours after the businesswoman picked up the piece of paper with my message, she came back down the aisle and sat in the seat beside me. She bent over, trying to stay low. "So, you're stuck too?" she asked. I kept my voice low. "Yeah, my name is Jack, by the way. I'd say nice to meet you, but..." She nodded. "I'm Mary. You're wrong. Getting your message was far the best thing about the past days. I spent the last day and a half thinking I was alone in this." She paused for a moment, looking up the aisles. When she spoke again, her voice was a whisper. "So, Jack, you have my theory on what the hell's going on?" I considered lying, but decided the truth was the best. "I think we might be dead." Mary shook her head. "Maybe it were just me or you. If this was some cosmic train to hell, why would there be two of us who realize what's going on?" "No idea." Mary pulled out her phone and handed it to me. It displayed the Wikipedia article for flight MH370, the airline that disappeared in 2014. I read through the article carefully. There were dozens of theories trying to explain what happened. They ranged from hypoxia to suicide to aliens. "Doesn't tell us much," I said. "Not much other than that this may have happened before," she said. "How about you? Any theories as to why anyone else can't see what's going on?" We talked it over and realized one thing we had in common was that we were both fast asleep at 4:03 a.m. There's no way we were the only ones asleep at the time, though. Maybe everyone else was just napping. I don't know about you, but I was well and truly asleep. The cabin lights flickered off, and dozens of red emergency lights in the floor flickered on, casting the cabin in a red glow. The intercom crackled to life, saying, "Passengers, please return to your seats. The seatbelt sign is fastened, and we may experience some turbulence. We'll be landing in about an hour." Mary froze. "Should I go back?" she asked. "Mary, they won't notice if you're gone, but maybe they already know, and they're just trying to separate us." Mary nodded. "We should stay together. That's a better idea." The intercom crackled again. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to announce the arrival of the captain. We'll be given the opportunity to speak with him. Please remain in your seats until he has called you. If you need assistance, don't worry. A flight attendant will happily help you on your way." Sounds of passengers getting to their feet echoed from further up in the plane. We sat in silence, trying to get a look through the curtains separating us from first class. "The captain?" I asked. "No idea, but it didn't sound like they were talking about pilot to me, did they?" "No." That's when a pungent, sulfurous smell hit us, so strong that I had to resist the urge to gag. It reminded me of the worst rotting eggs I'd ever smelled in my life. But the old woman sitting ahead of us didn't react. She just kept watching the movie on the back of her seat. "Don't cough," I said to Mary. We fought it for a few long seconds before giving in, coughing hard and violently. A second later, the curtain opened. Mary and I froze, staring down the red fuselage. 4 flight attendants passed through the curtain and made their way down to the rows toward us. Grins stretched wide across their faces. They were still crying, but this time the tears streaking down their face were darker. It's hard to say with the lighting, but it looked like blood. My eyes weren't drawn to them, though. I looked over their shoulders at the figure standing near the front of the plane. It was a black silhouette standing beside the cockpit door. It was at least 8 feet tall and pointing toward us with a single finger. It had called us. "The bathrooms," I shouted. We ran toward the back of the plane, the flight attendants closing behind us, blood dripping from their grinning cheeks to the carpet of the plane. "The captain is here," he said in perfect customer service voice, his grin widening as he moved toward us. We made it to the bathrooms, jumped into the opposite sides. I slammed the door shut and locked it. pressing my feet against the hole in the center part of the door, keep it closed. They began banging on the door and pulling at the handle, while I fought to keep it closed. "I'm sorry, but you'll both need to speak with the captain," one of the flight attendants said. "Jack," Mary screamed. "Jack, help." A distinct snapping sound, like breaking metal, came from her bathroom. She continued to scream as the sounds of struggling migrated up toward the front of the plane, toward the black figure I'd seen. I'd like to say I jumped out and fought them, that I distracted them or something. I didn't. She was carried away a few shots later. Her screams were cut off. That was a few hours ago, and I'm still locked inside this bathroom. I keep trying not to think of what they've done to her. The thing at this front of the plane didn't seem human. I hope it didn't kill her. Not after she was shouting for help like that. I couldn't take it. I haven't heard any movement outside in a few hours, but I'm terrified to open the door. I'm far from the seat outlet, so my phone's almost dead, and I haven't eaten in way too long. If I go out there, will the flight attendants remember? What if the thing is still waiting for people? I don't have much time to make a decision, but I'll update you all here what happens next. After another dozen hours or so, I opened the bathroom door. The lights in the cabin were back to normal and couldn't smell any sulfur. I cautiously made my way back to my seat and almost cried when the grinning, crying flight attendant came off my meal. That crappy airline food was the most delicious thing I'd ever eaten. When I finished, my mind immediately turned to Mary. What happened to her? I crept down the aisle toward the first class, trying to keep a low profile. Surprisingly, the flight attendants were nowhere to be seen. They'd almost seemed to ignore me, almost as if they wanted me to find her. She had a row to herself and was staring down at her phone at the window seat. I slid to the aisle and shook her arm. "Mary," I hissed. She pulled out her headphones and stared at me with a surprised expression. "Yeah, what's going on?" "And you are?" "Are you okay?" I asked. "What did that thing do to you? What did they do to you?" "I'm sorry. Remind me how I know you?" "What do you mean? I realized that sinking horror, that she had no idea who I was. I fought back tears. "Mary, how long have you been on this flight?" She checked the watch on her wrist. "Well, it's 4:03 a.m., so a few hours at least." She stared at me that same way that you'd look at a person claiming they were the second coming of Christ. Her tone was low and reassuring. "Hey, don't worry so much. Look on the bright side. We'll be landing in about an hour." I felt an iron grip on my arm and looked up to see two flight attendants. "Sir, this area is for first-class passengers only." They were still crying and grinning, but just with tears this time. I could still see streaks of blood staining the front of their uniforms, though. I was escorted back to my seat, where I spent the next several days. Attendants continued to stop by with food. I would use the bathroom, and soon was just going absolutely crazy with the monotony. In retrospect, those few days weren't so bad. There's a lot of content in the internet after all, even with crappy airplane Wi-Fi. No, it didn't get really bad until around day 10, after when the Wi-Fi failed. It was sometime a week later that I lost control and began screaming for a flight attendant. They didn't come for several minutes, but eventually one did. Just let me see the captain," I asked. The flight attendant bent low and spoke with the same customer service voice. "I'm sorry, sir. The captain has made his decision regarding you quite clear. You didn't answer his call, and will therefore wait." "How long?" "Quite a while, I'm afraid. Don't worry, sir. They'll be landing in about an hour." She straightened and walked away. I started making notches on the various parts of the plane seat to keep track of different things. One notch for each time I used the bathroom, one notch for each meal, one for every time I watched a given movie, that sort of thing. It was hell. I watched every movie in that seat back a dozen times over. If I ever acted out badly enough, I would be escorted back to my seat by one of the flight attendants. Any attempt at conversation with other passengers was met with confusion by them, followed by a quick escort back to my seat. I'd guess it was around day 30 that in a moment of panic and psychosis, I broke my laptop and phone, screaming at the top of my lungs. No one around me reacted in any way. 2 months later, I stunk. The muscles of my leg were tight and cramped silly. I finally concluded that suicide was my only option after my 138 rewatch of Thor Ragnarok. I got to my feet and lumped toward the emergency exit. I knew normally the pressure inside the airplane forced the doors up closed, but I figured that nothing about my situation was normal. If this didn't work, I'd find some other painful way to go. I grabbed at the handle and swung it open. To my shock, the door opened easily, though no wind of any kind whipped around the cabin. It remained the standard slight to cold temperature that it had been for the past who knows how long. The open door called to me, a black portal out of the plane. I stared at it for a long moment, almost too long. An attendant's hand grabbed my shoulder, pulling me away. In a fit of anger and strength that had surprised me, I wrenched away and jumped out of the plane. The wind whipping past my face was almost magical. A new sensation after so many months of the same. The ocean below me grew closer and larger, and I realized that suddenly, I didn't want to die after all. It grew larger and larger and larger, until it seemed that all I could see was darkness and waves. I impacted the surface of the water so fast and hard that my entire body jerked around in the seat. I pulled my head back, sucked at a bruised knuckle I'd hit on the seat in front of me. "No," I whispered, then shouted, "No, no, no!" A flight attendant ran down the aisle, kneeling beside me. "Are you okay, sir?" I clenched my hands into fists, almost swinging at her, but then I realized she wasn't grinning. She wasn't crying. To be honest, she looked a little scared of me. I reached out my right hand down my pocket where I could feel my now unbroken phone. 4:04 a.m. "Sir, if you can calm down, we'll be landing in about an hour." My mouth tasted like ash. "Thank you, I will," I managed. I stared unblinkingly at my phone. It now displayed 4:05 a.m. Then I looked out the window and began to cry at the sight of the city lights below me. We did land in about an hour. I can't even begin to explain why or how, but I'm currently sitting in an airport cafe typing this out. I'm free. I'm out. And I'm never going flying again.